Excuse me, Raquel, if I could just add to what the secretary said. Many of you in the media clearly missed the art of the deal. You clearly failed to see what President Trump is doing here.
Hold your ground. Let's see what happens. And China kept escalating and escalating, and now they have 125% tariffs that will be effective immediately.
Go ahead.
It even takes guts for our country to go through it. That's why I say be cool. They were saying about, see, just be cool. It's going to work out.
Chill.
It's going to work out, and it's working out.
The tariff endgame. President Trump is here with a new update, and he dropped this today that caused the markets to go bananas. We saw that CNBC was reporting that the Dow surged 2,900 points, the biggest gain since 2008. Whoa. And so they had live updates for us. It was a whirlwind of a day, but Scott Bessent came out. He said China's in big trouble. They done goof. And the president took some questions on this today as well with the race car drivers out in front of the White House. But it all started with this post from Trump. He said, based on the lack of respect that China has shown to the world markets, I am hereby raising the tariff charge to China by the United States of America to 125%, effective immediately. At some point, hopefully in the near future, China will realize that the days of ripping off the USA and other countries is no longer sustainable or acceptable. Conversely, and based on the fact that more than 75 countries have called representatives of the United States, including the Departments of Commerce, Treasury, and the USTR, to negotiate a solution to the subjects being discussed relative to trade barriers, tariffs, currency manipulation, and non-monetary tariffs, and that these countries have not, at my strong suggestion, retaliated in any way, shape, or form against the United States, I have authorized a 90-day pause and a substantially lowered reciprocal tariff during this period of 10%, also effective immediately. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Signed by the president. Now, that set off a total whirlwind. As we saw, the S&P skyrocketed almost 10%, the biggest one-day gain since 2008. Things are all over the place. 30 billion shares traded hands. Trump said the pause is coming out. Scott Bessent clarified that all countries except China would go back down to a 10% baseline, down from the higher rates that sent everybody nuts. There was a lot of pressure, and last night things were wild on the markets. If you were following the 10-year Treasury, gosh, it was crazy. It kept going up and up and up. So there's some people saying, well, maybe this was some pressure. Maybe this was them buckling. China was doing things. Japan was doing things. But now the stocks are ripping, as you can see. That's what the chart looked like on the day. Let's go. So good developments there. Now, we also had reaction. The president made the post, and then the media came in with a bunch of questions. And here is this. And the camera angles and other things get better as we go through this.
Trump is going to punch back harder. In that same vein, we have had more than 75 countries from around the world reach out to President Trump and his team here at the White House to negotiate better trade deals for the American worker. We have been overwhelmed with the amount of requests from countries around the world. I'll let the Secretary speak to that. We will continue with the tailor-made negotiations that I spoke about yesterday. In the meantime, there will be a 90-day pause on the reciprocal tariffs as these negotiations are ongoing, and the tariff level will be brought down to a universal 10% tariff. The Secretary here has been a huge part of the President's trade team, of course, and will continue to lead these negotiations moving forward to look out for the American worker, which is always President Trump's goal. So I'll take it over to our great Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent.
As the U.S. announced a tariff wall last week, many of those goods have already started flooding into Europe.
So as you see it now, this trade war is China versus the rest of the world.
Well, I'm not calling it a trade war, but I am saying that China has escalated, and President Trump responded very courageously to that, and we are going to work on a solution with our trading partners.
Excuse me, Raquel, if I could just add to what the Secretary said. Many of you in the media clearly missed the art of the deal. You clearly failed to see what President Trump is doing here. You tried to say that the rest of the world would be moved closer to China when in fact we've seen the opposite effect. The entire world is calling the United States of America, not China, because they need our markets, they need our consumers, and they need this president in the Oval Office to talk to them. And that's exactly why more than 75 countries have called, because the United States of America is the best place in the world to do business. And as the president has shown great courage, as the secretary has said, in choosing to retaliate against China even higher. Elena, go ahead.
Can you explain more of the decision making on what feels like a reversal here? I mean, just these went into effect back less than 15 hours ago, these tariffs. Why the pause now? What led to that?
No, again, President Trump created maximum negotiating leverage for himself, and which tariffs went into effect 15 hours ago? The ones that we have lowered went into effect a week ago, or they were announced a week ago, and we've just been overwhelmed by the response from mostly our allies who want to come and negotiate in good faith. So we are expecting them to come with their best deal. As I said a week ago today, don't retaliate, hold your ground, let's see what happens. And China, they kept escalating, and now they have 125% tariffs that will be effective immediately.
Mr. Secretary,
Go ahead.
Mr. Secretary, thanks so much for doing this. The 90-day pause on the reciprocal tariffs, is that because of the whiplash that we've been seeing across the financial markets? How much was what we saw in the stock markets, a part of this decision?
No, it's because of the large number of inbounds. We've had more than 75 countries contact us, and I imagine after today there will be more. So it is just a processing problem. Each one of these solutions is going to be bespoke. It is going to take some time, and President Trump wants to be personally involved. So that's why we're getting the 90-day pause.
Mr. Secretary, there was a tweet that you and Secretary Lutnick were in the Oval Office with the President talking about this. Can you talk about what that conversation was like and what you guys said to one another that led to this decision?
Look, it's all the president's decision, and the president had a level in mind to raise the China tariffs, and then he had the 3-month, essentially the 3-month pause in mind. We were discussing the exact wording. Of course.
It's the president's decision.
It's the president's decision. It was the president's decision to wait until today. And again, as I've said in the past, no one creates leverage for himself like President Trump.
What does the president want to see by this, I think it's July 9th, deadline to keep things paused? Is it just trade barriers coming down, or is it more than that?
Well, these are trade negotiations, but if countries want to come and offer other things, I talked about yesterday that we are thinking about a big LNG project in Alaska, that South Korea, Japan, Taiwan are interested in financing and taking a substantial portion of the offtake. But again, in essence, that is trade because it will decrease the trade deficit that we have with those countries. So everything's on the table.
Raquel, go ahead.
A clarification on the pause. What happened to those countries who just had 10% baseline tariffs, like Brazil and others? Are they still going to have this 90 days pause? Because you were saying that there will be a tariff of 10% for others. So what happened to those who just had a 10%?
Yeah, that's going to remain.
And do you call this an embargo to China?
Well, I'm not sure what you mean by the word embargo.
125% tariffs, like those, and then impose 84%. Isn't this an embargo?
Well, look, it's China's decision that we have the deficit with them. They sell us almost 5 times what we sell them. So again, I think it's an own goal by China.
Mr. Secretary, with this, does this signal that you're confident that you're going to be able to strike a satisfactory deal with all these 75 nations that approach you?
It signals that President Trump cares about trade and that we want to negotiate in good faith. And as I said, each one of these is going to be a separate, bespoke negotiation. So we are confident that having seen the other side of where this could go. And it was like I said last week, the market didn't understand. Those were maximum levels. The countries can think about those levels as they come to us to bring down their tariffs, their non-tariff trade barriers. We're going to discuss currency manipulation, subsidy of labor and industry.
Will the pause also apply to the sectoral tariffs that the president has announced, pharma, lumber, anything else?
No, it's on the
So those
reciprocal.
will still be coming here soon, right?
Mr. Secretary,
Mr.
as far as the
Secretary,
negotiation-
Mr. Secretary, so I want to ask you about what you're doing here. So the market is reacting crazily, right?
I haven't
Do you
seen
think
it.
that this move is going to sort of change and calm down the market reaction?
Well, I think what we've seen, I think the willingness by more than 75 countries to come and negotiate, I think now the market understands that everything they saw last Wednesday was a ceiling, and now we have a 10% the temporary floor. And I think my 35 years in the market, I always wanted certainty, so I think we've got more certainty.
But Mr. Secretary, why do people assume this is the last word? The president began this morning saying, be cool. 5 hours later, he announces a new policy. Why will investors in the market assume that this is it?
Because, again, as I said, we've given 90 days, and the only certainty we can provide is that the U.S. is going to negotiate in good faith, and we assume that our allies will too. And in terms of certainty, we will see what China does. But what I'm certain of is what China is doing will affect their economy much more than it will ours, because they have an export-driven, flood the world with cheap export models.
Yeah, we're
and
sick of it.
The rest of the world now understands, because when we put up our tariff wall, those exports were already flowing to the rest of the G7 and to the global south.
Mr. Secretary, how much of this decision was driven by the bond market cratering overnight? What is happening on China selling their bonds?
I have nothing that says that, and we actually had quite a good 10-year auction today. Again, this was driven by the president's strategy. He and I had a long talk on Sunday, and this was his strategy all along, and that you might even say that he goaded China into a bad position. They responded. They have shown themselves to the world be the bad actors, and we are willing to cooperate with our allies and with our trading partners who did not retaliate. It wasn't a hard message. Don't retaliate. Things will turn out well.
Mr. Secretary, these negotiations with these 75 countries, how long will that take? Will it be a matter of weeks? Will it be a matter of months? Do you expect financial markets to be stable during that time period?
Well, we've started with a 90-day pause, and we will see if more countries turn up what will happen. But we have a meeting with Vietnam today, and we have one of the largest trade deficits with them. So I'm hoping it will move in a good direction. I was at the Japanese ambassador's house last night for the Cherry Blossom Festival, which was quite festive, and he and I had a good chat. They are going to send a deal team over. So we'll see. These are complicated negotiations. These are imbalances that have taken decades to create. But I think having seen the maximum level Donald Trump is willing to go to, President Trump has created this negotiating leverage.
The Secretary is obviously a very busy man. As he has said, he's had more than 75 countries that the trade team has to respond to. I'd just like to end with this. For decades, Republicans and Democrats have said that these unfair trade practices are ripping off the American people, are ripping off our country, but nobody has ever done anything to address it. We finally have a president here at the White House who is playing the long game, who is doing what is right for the American worker and our industries here at home, and he has put together a fantastic team in Secretary Bessent, Secretary Lustnick, the entire trade team who will be focusing on negotiating these good deals to put the American workers first, and we're going to get to work to do that.
Why is not the EU being treated like China? They retaliated this morning. Oh, they did? Well, they better walk that back. Maybe they're like, oh, crap, and they're going to walk that back. We'll see, of course, what happens. Scott has a lot of work to do. And Trump came out and brought the race car drivers out, and he took some questions after he was with them for a little bit. He got a bunch of questions about this. Here's what that sounded like outside the White House today.
There was a pause put in on the tariffs. Can you walk us through your thinking about why you decided to put a 90-day pause?
Well, I thought that people were jumping a little bit out of line. They were getting yippy, you know?
Yeah,
they were getting a little bit yippy, a little bit afraid, unlike these champions, because we have a big job to do. No other president would have done what I did. No other president. I know the presidents. They wouldn't have done it.
No.
And it had to be done. What was happening to us on trade, you know, if you look at it, not only with China, but China was by far the biggest abuser in history, and others also, but somebody had to do it. They had to stop because it was not sustainable. Last year, China made $1 trillion off trade with the United States. That's not right. And now I've reversed it. It's for a short period of time, but we made $2 billion. We're making now $2 billion a day, and somebody had to do it. Roger actually said it. Charles Schwab was here a little while ago, one of the great financial people, and he said he's been waiting for 40 years for somebody to do what I did over the last month. And if you didn't do it, you wouldn't have a country. It wouldn't be sustainable. So I'm honored to have done it. And, you know, look, nothing's over yet, but we have a tremendous amount of spirit from other countries, including China. China wants to make a deal. They just don't know how quite to go about it. You know, it's one of those things they don't know how quite. They're proud people. And President Xi's a proud man. I know him very well. And they don't know quite how to go about it, but they'll figure it out in the process of figuring it out. But they want to make a deal. And we have many other countries, as you know, many more than 75. And they all want to come, and they want to come here, or they'll go to Commerce, or they'll go to Treasury. We have our great senators here and congressmen. They'll call John. They'll do somebody. They'll go through somebody, but they're all calling, how do we do this? They all want to make a deal. Somebody had to do what we did, and I did a 90-day pause for the people that didn't retaliate, because I told them if you retaliate, we're going to double it. And that's what I did with China, because they did retaliate.
Don't do it.
So we'll see how it all works out. I think it's going to work out amazing. I think that our country is going to be, at the end of a year or shorter, but I think we're going to have something that nobody would have dreamt possible. A man like Roger Penske, I don't want to get him in trouble with China, so I won't, but he would know that someday you have to cut the bow and you have to do what you have to do, right, Roger? And that's what I did, and I'm very happy to have done it.
The Prime Minister of Greece just told Breitbart's Matt Boyle that he thinks absolutely the European Union and the United States could work out a trade deal that's win-win and, quote, mutually beneficial to both sides. What do you think about the Prime Minister's comments, and do you think a deal could be struck with the European Union?
First of all, I know him. He's a good man, and I appreciate his comments. Yeah, a deal could be made with every one of them. A deal's going to be made with China. A deal's going to be made with every one of them, and there'll be fair deals. I just want fair. They will be fair deals for everybody, but they weren't fair to the United States. They were sucking us dry, and you can't do that. You know, we have $36 trillion of debt for a reason. We don't have it there for fun. They have it for a reason. And people took advantage of our country, and they ripped us off for decades. I've been thinking about this for decades. If you
He's been talking about it too.
I was young like these guys, and those are good old days, I'll tell you, Roger. But I was like these guys, young, and I was talking about it. Nothing changed, and nothing was done about it. Then I did it. In my first term, I did it, and did it well. We took in hundreds of billions of dollars from China and others, and I started the process, but then we had to fix up from the COVID mess caused by China. We had to fix up from that, and we did a good job of doing it. And when we handed back the reins after a rigged election, and when we handed back the reins, the stock market was higher than it was before COVID coming in. So, you know, we did a great job, but we didn't have time to do the big thing, which we're doing now. And, you know, it's like a patient is sick. You have to do surgery. The patient is very, very sick. And Joe Biden handed us over a country that was in very serious trouble, economically and in every other way. They let China run away with things. They let other countries run away with things. And maybe worst of all, in a certain way, is what they did at the border. We had people pouring into our country by the millions. Many of them were murderers and drug lords and thieves and people from prisons from all over the world. And there were people from mental institutions, insane asylums. They were taking their mentally insane and they were dumping them into our country. And I'll tell you, Tom Homan and Kristi Noem are doing a fantastic job in removing them. And now the Supreme Court just gave us numerous good rulings.
And they sued
where
again.
We have to be able to get them out. You had other judges trying to take over the system. And think of it, they take over. They want these people coming back. Tren de Aragua from Venezuela, the Venezuela jails that cut off the fingers of a man in Colorado. They cut off his fingers because he called the police looking for help. They said, "Did you call the police?" He said, "Yes, I did." "Put your hand down," and they cut off the fingers. This is what they want to bring these people back. No.
ACLU's favorite
and I want to thank
people.
the President of El Salvador for the job he's done, because that's the way it has to be done. It's too bad.
Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi, they've been talking about tariffs for decades. How come when these Democrat elites want tariffs, everything's hunky-dory, but when President Trump wants tariffs, all hell breaks loose? Do you see this double?
Great question.
I love this guy.
Yeah, great
Whoever
question.
The hell that is.
Great question.
That's really nice. I appreciate that question. No, Chuck Schumer, Nancy Pelosi, everybody knew you had to do it, but they never had the guts to do it. It does take guts. It even takes guts for our country to go through it. That's why I say be cool. They were saying about, see, just be cool. It's going to work out.
Chill.
It's going to work out, and it's working out. I can tell you, working out maybe faster than I thought. But I said it's going to take a little conditioning. It's a transition to, it's really, I think it's a transition to greatness. It's going to be greatness. Our country's going to be, there'll be nothing like it.
A lot of sirens
and
today.
People investing
Sheesh.
in our country, they're going to do better than ever done before. We have more car manufacturers, Roger, coming into our country now. Speaking of cars, we've never seen anything like it. And they're coming in because of the election, but they're coming in because of the tariffs, because they don't want to pay 25 or 50 or whatever it may be. They don't want to pay that. They can't pay that. We had 3 cancellations in Mexico, building a plant. They're all coming into the United States. Canada, they're coming in. From China, they're coming in from everywhere. And that's just cars. We have chip makers coming. We're the biggest chip maker in the world, from Taiwan, coming in, spending $3 billion to build plants. Mostly a big plant. This is a hell of a plant when you spend the kind of money that they're going to go $200 to $300 billion, not million. You know, you'd say million would be the right number. It's not $200 to $300 billion. Think of that. $300 billion. If you look at Apple, Apple is going to spend $500 billion building a plant. They wouldn't be doing that if I didn't do this. They'd just keep building them in China, and that's unsustainable. It's not a pleasant thing to do, but I appreciate the question. And, you know, interestingly, Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi, Crazy Nancy, they've wanted to do this for years, but they never had a president that had the guts to do it, because it does take guts, believe me.
What's your credibility like? Because you said that these tariffs would go into effect on Monday. You said no pause. Today there is a pause. So
yeah, it's not a question of that. You have to have flexibility. I could say,
You
here's a
said
wall.
you wouldn't
I'm going to go
do
through
this
that
or
wall.
pause
I'm
it,
going to
but
go
you
through
did.
it no matter what. Keep going, and you can't go through the wall. Sometimes you have to be able to go under the wall, around the wall, or over the wall. These guys know that better than anybody, right? You got to go around them sometimes. sometimes. You're not going to go through them. So I consider, I think in financial markets, because they change. Look how much it changed today. We went from pretty moderate today, but over the last few days, it looked pretty glum to, I guess they say it was the biggest day in financial history. That's a pretty big change. And I think the word would be flexible. You have to be flexible. Like he's asking the question about some companies. Some companies, through no fault of their own, they happen to be in an industry that is more affected by these things than others. You have to be able to show a little flexibility, and I'm able to do that. I'm going to say hello to these champions because they are great champions. I got to say hello.
All right. That's the president today. So you can see he was out there answering all the questions about the tariffs while he was multitasking, hanging out with race car champions. So that's the president, and some good developments from him. So we'll see what happens. And it's interesting, questions we hear are from people who sound like they've never had a negotiation or a back and forth in their entire lives. It's like, well, you changed. Well, that's kind of how this whole thing works. And it's okay to say something and hold the line, and then when something changes, adjust your strategy to conform to the new reality. So that's what they did. And I think ultimately the pressure on China is really where the end game was from the beginning. So Trump out there explaining what happened, and the stock market looking pretty good. Those charts going up and up and up, and the winning continues.